Here's the official story. Marilyn Monroe died alone in her home on the night of August 4th, 5th, 1962, from an overdose of barbiturates. Police report, suicide. But FBI documents declassified in 2006 showed that Marilyn's home was being monitored by at least 4 different intelligence agencies that night. In the Los Angeles police chief's private notes, it said, "Orders came from the White House. Close this case quickly." The most shocking detail was the contradictions found in the autopsy report. There were no pill residues in Marilyn's stomach, but her blood contained lethal levels of barbiturates. This was physically impossible. Independent researchers examining her last 24 hours determined that at least 7 people entered Marilyn's house that day. 2 of them were Secret Service agents, 1 was a doctor, and the others were unidentified individuals. So what really happened that night? If you want to follow this story to the end, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the truth about Marilyn Monroe's last 24 hours is far darker than what official history has told you. August 4, 1962, Saturday morning. The sun hadn't fully risen yet in Los Angeles, but the lights were on at Marilyn Monroe's Brentwood home. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, heard sounds coming from Marilyn's bedroom around 7 a.m. This was unusually early because Marilyn typically slept until noon. When Mrs. Murray knocked gently on the door, Marilyn's voice sounded tired but also anxious. When she opened the door, the scene surprised her. Marilyn was dressed, her hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. It was as if she hadn't slept all night. Marilyn said something strange to Mrs. Murray that morning. The housekeeper, who skipped this detail in her police statement, remembered these words years later in a private interview: "Today is an important day. Either everything will be fixed or nothing will happen." This vague statement seemed meaningless to Mrs. Murray at the time, but when Marilyn was found dead 20 hours later, these words would take on a much deeper meaning. Marilyn's behavior that morning was different from normal. She kept looking out the window, checking the phone, and seemed restless, as if waiting for someone. At 8:30 a.m., Marilyn came downstairs to the kitchen and asked Mrs. Murray for coffee. But she didn't even touch the coffee. Instead, she went to the phone in the living room and made her first call. This call was to her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. The phone conversation lasted about 15 minutes, and Miss Murray heard Marilyn's voice rising. Dr. Greenson later gave conflicting statements about this conversation, first saying Marilyn was calm, then admitting she was anxious, and finally confessing that she felt threatened. These changing statements should have caught the police's attention, right? Absolutely, but they never did. Around 10:45 a.m., a black Cadillac parked in front of Marilyn's house. 2 men got out, both wearing dark suits and sunglasses. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Elizabeth Pollard, saw these men while working in her garden and later said in her statement, "They didn't look like regular visitors. They had a very formal, very serious air about them. It was like they were there on business." These 2 men stayed in Marilyn's house for approximately 45 minutes. There's no record of what they discussed because this visit doesn't appear in any official documents. In FBI documents released years later, there was clear evidence that Marilyn's house was being monitored that day. An FBI agent wrote, "Around 11 a.m., 2 unidentified males visited the subject. They remained in the house for 40 to 50 minutes. Identities could not be verified." This note showed that the FBI was actively monitoring Marilyn. But who were these 2 men? Some researchers claim they were CIA agents. Others say they were from the Kennedy family's private security team. One thing is certain: this visit was never mentioned in the official police investigation. After the men left, Marilyn became much more restless. According to Mrs. Murray's statement, Marilyn was pacing up and down in the living room, rubbing her hands, and constantly looking at her watch. As noon approached, Marilyn grabbed the phone and made several more calls. One of these calls was to her close friend Peter Lawford. Lawford was John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law and served as a bridge between the Kennedy family and Marilyn. The phone conversation was brief, but Lawford would later say the conversation was tense. At 12:30 p.m., another call came to Marilyn's house. This time it was from Robert Kennedy's private line. The phone rang for a long time and Marilyn didn't answer. Mrs. Murray said Marilyn's bedroom door was closed and no sound was coming from inside. The phone finally stopped, but it started ringing again 10 minutes later. This time Marilyn answered, and the conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Mrs. Murray heard Marilyn's voice rising from the kitchen. She couldn't hear exactly what was said, but she remembered hearing the words "enough" and "documents." Among the FBI records released in 2006, there was a very striking note about this phone conversation. The FBI was tapping Marilyn's phone, and part of this conversation had been recorded. The recording noted that Robert Kennedy's voice was threatening and firm. Marilyn was referring to certain documents and saying they could be released to the public. The FBI note continued, "Subject claimed to possess sensitive materials and stated she had secured them. Kennedy warned the subject about this and informed her their relationship was over." Immediately after this phone call, Marilyn called her psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, again. This time the conversation was shorter, lasting only 7 to 8 minutes. Dr. Greenson said that during this conversation, Marilyn was very sad but also angry. Marilyn had told him about her relationship with the Kennedys ending and how it made her feel. Dr. Greenson tried to calm Marilyn and said he would come to her house in the afternoon to see her. This visit would happen, but the results would be very different from expected. Around 2 a.m., Marilyn's house received another visitor. This time it was Dr. Greenson. The doctor met with Marilyn for about an hour and later said this meeting was therapeutic, but the neighbors' statements told a different story. Mrs. Pollard said Dr. Greenson looked very worried and rushed when leaving Marilyn's house. As the doctor got into his car, he looked behind him several times and acted as if he were being followed. This behavior wasn't what you'd expect after just a routine therapy session. Shortly after Dr. Greenson left, around 3:30 p.m., another car arrived at Marilyn's house. This time 3 people got out. One of the neighbors, Mr. Murray, said these men looked like government agents. Dark suits, black shoes, very serious facial expressions. They knocked on Marilyn's door and were let in. This visit lasted approximately 40 minutes. There's no information about what was discussed inside because this visit also doesn't appear in official records. Even the FBI documents don't mention this visit, which is very strange because the FBI was actively monitoring the house that day. After these visitors left, Marilyn's condition got even worse. Mrs. Murray said Marilyn went up to her bedroom and locked the door. Crying sounds were coming from behind the door. Mrs. Murray knocked on the door and asked if Marilyn was okay. Marilyn replied, "I just want to be alone." Her voice was hoarse and tired. Mrs. Murray suspected Marilyn was using drugs but didn't know what to do. She thought about calling Dr. Greenson but was afraid Marilyn wouldn't want that. At 6 p.m., Marilyn came out of her bedroom. She looked terrible, her hair was disheveled, her eyes were swollen, her walk was unsteady. Mrs. Murray asked if she should prepare dinner, but Marilyn shook her head. "I'm not hungry, I just want something to drink," she said. Mrs. Murray brought her orange juice, but Marilyn didn't drink it. Instead, she went to the phone in the living room and made another call. This call was the second one to Peter Lawford. The conversation lasted longer this time, about 15 minutes. Lawford told this phone conversation in different versions over the years. In his first statement, he said Marilyn was a bit sad but manageable. But in an interview he gave in the 1970s, he said very different things. Marilyn was really bad that night. Her voice sounded strange, like she was drugged. She talked to me like she was saying goodbye. She said, "Thanks for everything, Pete. You were a real friend." I got worried and said I should come see her right away, but she said no, it's too late, and hung up the phone. This statement contradicted the official story. If Marilyn was really saying goodbye, why didn't Lawford take immediate action? At 7:30 p.m., Marilyn's house had one last visitor. This time it was another doctor, Dr. Greenson's assistant. His name was Dr. Hyman Engelberg, and he was the one who prescribed Marilyn's medications. Dr. Engelberg said he came to check on Marilyn. The visit was short, only 15-20 minutes. As Dr. Engelberg was leaving, he told Mrs. Murray that Marilyn needed to rest, and she needed to make sure she didn't take too many pills. This warning was odd because Mrs. Murray wasn't medically trained and wouldn't know how to monitor Marilyn's drug use. At 8 p.m., Marilyn went back up to her bedroom. She said goodnight to Mrs. Murray and closed the door. Mrs. Murray wasn't sure if she locked it or not, but before going to bed, Marilyn made one more phone call. This conversation was with a Mexican writer and director named José Bolanos. Bolanos was someone Marilyn was flirting with at the time. The phone conversation lasted about 10 minutes, and Bolanos said Marilyn seemed sad but calm. Marilyn had told him, "We'll see each other soon." This was the last known phone call Marilyn made. Between 9 and 10 p.m. from the outside, everything seemed normal at Marilyn's house. The bedroom lights were on, the house had quieted down. Mrs. Murray was watching television in her own room. But according to FBI surveillance reports, around 10:30 p.m., a vehicle passed by Marilyn's house. The vehicle slowed down in front of the house, stopped, then continued. The identities of the people in the vehicle couldn't be determined. This detail remained hidden in FBI archives for years and was only released to the public in 2006. As midnight approached, Mrs. Murray stayed awake because light was seeping from under Marilyn's bedroom door. Mrs. Murray thought Marilyn was still awake and perhaps having trouble sleeping. Around 12:30 a.m., Mrs. Murray got up to use the bathroom and listened at the door as she passed by Marilyn's room. There was no sound coming from inside. The door was still locked. Mrs. Murray decided not to disturb Marilyn and returned to her own room. This was the statement from the last person to see Marilyn Monroe alive. But was it really? According to the official police report, Mrs. Murray woke up at 3:30 a.m. and light was still seeping from under Marilyn's bedroom door. The worried Mrs. Murray knocked on the door but got no answer. She tried to force the door, but it was locked. Panicking, Mrs. Murray looked through the window from outside and saw Marilyn lying motionless in bed inside. She immediately called Dr. Greenson, and the doctor arrived at the house within 20 minutes. They broke the window and went inside, finding Marilyn's lifeless body. The phone receiver was in her hand, as if she'd been trying to reach someone. Dr. Greenson realized Marilyn was dead and called the police. Time of notification 4:25 a.m. But there were serious inconsistencies in this official story. First, some neighbors said there had been activity at Marilyn's house throughout the night. One neighbor claimed to have seen cars parking in front of the house after midnight. Another neighbor said they heard an ambulance siren around 2 a.m. But in the official records, no ambulance call was made to Marilyn's house at that time. These contradictions were ignored for years. The second major inconsistency was the changes in Mrs. Murray's statements. In her first police statement, she said she found Marilyn at 3:30 a.m., but years later in an interview she confessed that she actually went to Marilyn's room shortly after midnight, around 12:30 a.m., and found her dead. But why did she lie in her first statement? Mrs. Murray said, "They told me to say that." Who? She never fully answered this question. Marilyn Monroe's autopsy was performed at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office on the morning of August 5th. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. Thomas Noguchi, a young and inexperienced doctor. The autopsy report stated that Marilyn died from an overdose of barbiturates. The amount of drugs found in her blood was at lethal levels. But there was a very strange detail in the autopsy report. There were no pill residues in Marilyn's stomach. Normally, if someone takes an overdose of pills, pill residues must be found in the stomach. But there was nothing in Marilyn's stomach, only a small amount of yellowish liquid. This situation was very problematic medically. If Marilyn took the pills orally, there should definitely have been traces in the stomach. Dr. Noguchi noted this situation as unusual in the report but didn't elaborate further. Some medical experts said this situation could only explain one thing. The drug wasn't given orally, but through another route. The most likely route was injection. But no injection marks were found on Marilyn's body. The other possible route was rectal administration, meaning the drug was given as a suppository. This method would make it possible to administer high doses of drugs without leaving traces. Another strange detail in the autopsy report was the signs of damage found in Marilyn's liver. This damage was consistent with chronic drug use, but at the same time it indicated much more and longer-term use than the amount of drugs Marilyn took on the night she died. This raised another question. Did Marilyn really commit suicide, or was she being slowly poisoned? Some researchers suggested that other substances may have been systematically mixed into the drugs Marilyn took in the weeks before her death. Immediately after Marilyn Monroe's death, the FBI showed special interest in this case. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, had been keeping files on her for years due to Marilyn's relationships with the Kennedy family. When Marilyn died, FBI agents immediately went to Los Angeles and conducted their own independent investigation at the scene. The results of this investigation were kept secret for decades. In 2006, following applications made under the Freedom of Information Act, some of these files were released to the public. In the FBI files, there were very striking notes about Marilyn's death. An FBI agent had written, "Subject's death occurred under suspicious circumstances. Evidence found at the scene is inconsistent with the official explanation." In another note it said, "Direct orders received from the White House. This case must be closed as quickly as possible, and media interest must be minimized." These notes showed that Marilyn's death wasn't just being handled as a local police case, but as a matter with national security dimensions. The most shocking FBI note was written the day before Marilyn's death, on August 4th. This note said, "Subject claims to possess sensitive documents. These documents allegedly document personal relationships and secret meetings involving the highest-level government officials. Subject says she has secured these documents and can release them to the public if necessary." This note confirmed that Marilyn really did have documents that were dangerous to the Kennedy family. But these documents were never found. After Marilyn died, her house was searched thoroughly, but no documents were found. According to the official police report, Marilyn Monroe died alone in her bedroom between 12:30 and 3:30 a.m. But witness statements and FBI records showed that other things were happening at the house during this time period. Neighbor Mrs. Elizabeth Pollard said she saw an ambulance parked in front of Marilyn's house around 1:30 a.m. Two people got out of the ambulance, went into the house, and came out about 20 minutes later, but they weren't carrying anything. Mrs. Pollard first gave this statement to the police, but her statement wasn't included in the official report. Years later, in interviews she gave, she said, "I was told to forget about that night, but I know what I saw." Another neighbor, Mr. Harold Weber, claimed to have seen even more striking things that night. Around 2 a.m., a black helicopter landed in front of Marilyn's house. Mr. Weber found this so absurd that he didn't even tell his wife the next day. "But I definitely saw a helicopter. It wasn't very loud, like it was specially made or something," he said. This claim was never verified, but interestingly, in CIA document releases made in the 1990s, it came out that the CIA was using silent helicopters in the Los Angeles area during that period. The most striking witness statement came from a young man living near Marilyn's house. This 17-year-old was up late that night and was looking out the window. He said he saw 3 men enter Marilyn's house around 2:30 a.m. The men didn't enter through the front door, but through the backyard. They stayed inside for about 40 minutes, and when they came out, one of them was carrying a large bag. This witness statement also wasn't included in the official report, and the young man was silenced about this for years. One of the biggest mysteries about the night of Marilyn Monroe's death was where Robert Kennedy was that night. According to the official statement, Robert Kennedy was in San Francisco that day and was spending the weekend at a ranch with his family. But many witnesses claim to have seen Robert Kennedy in Los Angeles that night. There were witnesses who said he attended a party at Peter Lawford's house. Some witnesses even claimed that Robert Kennedy went to Marilyn's house. In the FBI files, there were conflicting notes about this matter. One FBI agent had written, "There are unverified reports that Robert Kennedy was in Los Angeles that night." Another note said, "RFK's travel records were checked. According to official records, he was in San Francisco." But new witness statements that emerged in the 1980s claimed that Robert Kennedy came to Los Angeles by private plane and was in the city late at night. One of these witnesses was an employee who worked at Santa Monica Airport that night and said he recognized Robert Kennedy. Within the first 24 hours after Marilyn Monroe died, her house was systematically searched and cleaned. The police examined the house for the official investigation, but very strangely, most of Marilyn's personal belongings disappeared. Her diaries, letters, private photos, all gone. Mrs. Murray said that before the police came, some men came and thoroughly searched Marilyn's study. She never explained who these men were, but said it was pointless to resist them. The most striking loss was Marilyn's red diary. Her close friends knew that Marilyn wrote in this diary every day. It was said that she recorded important phone calls, meetings, and personal thoughts in the diary. This diary was never found. Peter Lawford remembered that Marilyn had told him about the diary and said, "If something happens to me, this diary will explain everything." But the diary disappeared after Marilyn's death as if it never existed. Marilyn's house phone records also mysteriously disappeared. The phone company said it delivered that day's records to the police, but these records never appeared in the police file. Years later, a journalist managed to find a copy of these records, and the information that came out was shocking. Marilyn had made a total of 18 phone calls on August 4th. 5 of them were to numbers in Washington, D.C. 3 were to blocked numbers, meaning the identity of the caller or called party was hidden. Such blocked numbers were typically used by government agencies or high-security lines. The 2 doctors who played a role in Marilyn Monroe's death, Dr. Ralph Greenson and Dr. Hyman Engelberg, gave conflicting statements over the years. Dr. Greenson, in his first statement, said he only saw Marilyn once that day in the afternoon. But Mrs. Murray's statement was different. According to her, Dr. Greenson came to the house one more time late at night. Why did Dr. Greenson hide this second visit? He never gave a satisfactory explanation. Dr. Engelberg admitted that he had been prescribing Marilyn too many drugs lately. When the pill bottles found in Marilyn's house were examined, it was seen that 3 different types of barbiturates had been prescribed in the last 3 weeks. Taking such high doses of drugs posed serious health risks. When Dr. Engelberg was asked why he prescribed so many drugs, he said, "My patient insisted, and I wanted to help her." But in terms of medical ethics, a doctor isn't expected to give every drug his patient requests. Had Dr. Engelberg been feeding Marilyn's drug addiction? The most suspicious point was the conversations both doctors had with each other and with other people after Marilyn's death. Phone records showed that Dr. Greenson, immediately after Marilyn's body was found and before calling the police, called 2 other numbers. One of these numbers belonged to Peter Lawford. The other was a line registered to the Department of Justice. Why did Dr. Greenson call these people first instead of the police? This question was never answered. The news of Marilyn Monroe's death made headlines in the world press on the morning of August 5th. But what was striking was how the news was controlled and how a certain narrative was created. In the first reports, there was only emphasis on tragic suicide. The Kennedy family's name wasn't mentioned at all. In FBI's secret notes, it said media relations are being controlled, leakage of sensitive information is being prevented. The Los Angeles Police Department very quickly made a suicide statement to the press, yet at that time the autopsy hadn't even been completed. This hasty statement aroused the suspicion of many journalists. Some investigative journalists wanted to do more in-depth investigations, but the police department didn't give them information. The file was marked as a closed case, and no more information was given to the media. Over the years, some brave journalists re-investigated Marilyn's death. In the 1980s, Los Angeles County considered reopening the case. New witness statements were collected, old reports were re-examined. But in the end, the official decision didn't change: probable suicide. However, one of the prosecutors who conducted the investigation said in an interview after he retired, "We were put under a lot of pressure, we were prevented from reaching some witnesses, some documents weren't shown to us." Marilyn Monroe's last 24 hours still haven't been fully illuminated even 60 years later. The official story says suicide, but the evidence paints a much more complex picture. FBI records, witness statements, autopsy inconsistencies, and missing documents all point to another story. Did Marilyn really end her own life, or was she silenced because of the secrets she knew? We may never learn the definitive answer to this question. But one thing is certain: Marilyn Monroe's death isn't just a tragic Hollywood story. This represents a dark point where power, politics, and covert operations intersect. The Kennedy family, FBI, CIA, and Hollywood all are part of this story. And Marilyn was a woman caught in the middle of these powerful players, knowing dangerous secrets. Perhaps the most important question is this: if Marilyn really had documents that could destroy the Kennedy family, where did these documents go? Who took them? And where are they still being kept? If these documents come to light, it might be necessary to rewrite not just Marilyn's death, but the entire political history of the 1960s. Maybe that's why, even 60 years later, some files are still being kept secret. Marilyn Monroe's last words were too late, that she said to Peter Lawford on the phone. We don't know what she meant at that moment, but today, when we look at her story, maybe she meant this: too late to tell the truth, too late to save herself, or maybe too late for justice for her.